Hi, my name's Gary Fry, and I've been asked to give you a little bit of my story so that from it maybe something inspirational perhaps might come of it, and encourage you to continue the journey that you've obviously started with study. I'm a local Northern Territory Aboriginal man, and my background is from Katherine. I'm a Dagaman man, and basically I've lived all my life in Darwin, and I'm someone who's made a commitment to myself, but also to my community, to my Aboriginal community, and to the broader community that I've lived in all my life. So hopefully from my conversation with you, you'll learn a little bit about the journey of study, and how to actually dig deep and to get through the study and to find success. I'm a person who's pretty tenacious. I don't like giving up. I don't like being beaten. Not sure where that comes from, but I'm pretty sure most of us have probably got that somewhere in us. I'm a current Northern Territory School principal. I'm the only Indigenous executive contract principal in the Northern Territory, and it's been like that like forever, which is very sad. There's only 2 Indigenous principals, local Indigenous principals in the Northern Territory. So it's been, I stay involved because basically if I don't and the other Indigenous principal doesn't, we've got a situation here in the Northern Territory with all our Indigenous students going through school not seeing Indigenous principals and Indigenous teachers. So I'm committed to that. I'm a person who's got a number of qualifications. In fact, I think I've got 5 or 6 qualifications. I started off, I didn't do really well at school, but I started to pick up my socks after school. But basically, just to give you a quick rundown, I was born in Darwin and in the mid-1960s, and I spent my early years growing up in Camilda College. And in those days, Camilda wasn't the same sort of institution it is today. It was mostly Aboriginal people from the bush, and that obviously changed in the mid-80s. But in my early years, I grew up near a leprosarium. Lots of people don't know a bit about that history of the Northern Territory, but there was a leprosarium in East Arm. Prior to that, it was at Channel Island. But I grew up not far from the East Arm leprosarium, and I grew up in a really strong, traditionally oriented Aboriginal world when I was a young boy. It caused me later on, as I became a teacher, to spend 10 years of my life out in remote communities across the Northern Territory. So I'm someone who's learnt from the 60s that, you know, as an Aboriginal person, we did get treated differently, and very, very differently. And rather than see that as something that would weaken me, it just made me stronger to try to fix the things that I was seeing. And I come from a big family, a family of 10, and I've always, my mother grew up in a mission, and you know, she was one of the best for her kids. So and my father, who was an only child from New South Wales. So basically, I've made it my lifelong ambition to do the best that I can. And I went through school just wanting to do sport, like a lot of young fellas. I did reasonably well at that, but it took me in all sorts of destructive directions as I grew up, because I just wanted to basically party with my mates and have a good time. But fortunately, after I finished high school, and I completed year 11, and I then got an electrical apprenticeship, and I did that for 4 years, and I completed that, and I went on to do some work around Darwin contracting and out bush, and you know, I was still quite young, then I made the decision to actually go into teaching. And the reason I did that is because some of my older siblings were already engaged in teaching. So I thought, well, if they can do it, so can I. So it really was an interesting thing for me, because even though I did an electrical apprenticeship, that was mainly about maths, and that was my strong area. I could do maths, but I found English quite troubling. So I had to do some bridging courses when I first started, just to get me over the line, which I used to do nighttime classes. But because I really wanted to do it and I didn't want to give up, I did that. And so I completed my teaching qualifications in 1989, and I went out to teach basically for 10 years straight. In that time I became a school principal of small schools in remote communities. I've been at some of the schools I've been at as Groote Eylandt, Ungarugu, Beswick Woogala, where a lot of my people are, Yuendamu, Central Australia, Pepperminardi. I've taught in schools in Darwin, Leanya Primary, I was a senior teacher there, an AP and acting principal at Waggaman. And I was a principal for 3 years at Malden and Palmerston. This year, for the last couple of years, this year and into next, I'm the principal in residence, and basically my role is to help develop our principals across the Northern Territory, their skill levels. And one of the things that I've done this year is to develop a Master of Education for Charles Darwin University, and I'll be delivering units next year, so which will be a very interesting space for me, because I've got a school background, not a tertiary background in terms of work. So, but looking forward to it. With my qualifications, as I mentioned, I've got a background in the trades. I never ever thought that I would continue on with my studies, because I thought, once I became a tradesman, that was it. I had a really good wage, but something inside me was saying it wasn't enough. And one of the things that really caused me to go into teaching was, I was still quite a young fellow. I was about 21 I think it was, and I went out to a community, and I knew a lot of the families there, and I saw the kids getting into trouble, just going in all sorts of directions, and I felt that, and I've made my decision then that I wanted to help these kids and help communities and help families, and so that sort of caused me to go into teaching. So I've to cut a long story short around that, I've along that period of time I've continued my studies. With each little success that I've developed over time, I realised that, hang on, because I left school not thinking I was bright or anything or I could achieve much. So I thought, well, I'll give it a go. But in saying that, I always made a promise to myself that if I gave something a go, I wouldn't walk away from it easily. If it meant I had to work through the night to get an assignment done, I would do that. If it meant that I would stop spending time around my mates from footy, I would do that, because I put that and I valued that study and my future above everything else. I needed to look after myself, because if I looked after myself, I figured that I could look after other people well, and I could do a job well. It meant that I could do well in both black world and white world, and I could be seen for being someone who was competent rather than someone who was just getting jobs because of the colour of his skin, which I didn't want to see happen. So I've always made sure that I've fought my way through, and I've never given up on myself. But I've probably done more years of study outside of school than I did in school. I've completed my teaching, I've completed my electrical, I've also completed a diploma of business, I've completed a graduate diploma in leadership and administration, I've completed a graduate diploma in leadership and change management, and I've completed a master's with first class honours out of Deakin in educational leadership and administration. And I'm also looking at 2013 the commencement of a PhD, which will be focused on the Northern Territory, and it'll be focused on ways that we can improve education for our students, our children and our families. It's my real strong belief that, and I know lots of people share this, that our kids are getting a raw deal. I think the education system creates lots of victims that it shouldn't be creating. We can do a lot better. But in order for that to happen, it means that we need more Aboriginal thinking people and who bring an Aboriginal consciousness to the study and to the research and to the arguments for change. Because at the moment it's quite often non-Aboriginal people making decisions on behalf of Aboriginal people. So it's not doing any of us any good, and so I've made that commitment to do that. Along the way I've given talks as a principal nationally. I gave a 40-minute address at the National Press Gallery in Canberra in 2010. A keynote speech there. I gave a keynote speech to 300 principals in Victoria last year on educational leadership. That was a big buzz, to talk to non-Aboriginal people about their own business, and it wasn't about Aboriginal children at all. It was about reforms in education. So it was something that I really enjoyed doing. I've given keynote speeches in Tasmania to medical doctors on education, Indigenous doctors as well. And I'm a part of the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Principals Association, and I've been asked on occasion to speak on their behalf. That's a group of people that, like myself, are committed. We're national, we're in every state and territory, and we look at ways that we can influence the federal agenda on education. So these are all really interesting outcomes for me, because if you'd asked me 15 years ago, 20 years ago perhaps, when I was still a relatively young person, I was young, and I would never think that I'd go on this journey, because when I left school I actually hated school. I didn't like school at all. Even though I found reasonable success there, I was fairly lazy. I didn't think much of my teachers. There were some that I liked, but there were lots that I disgraded with. A lot of that was my own fault too, my own attitude. It wasn't just the teachers themselves. It was lots of things, I suppose. But I didn't enjoy. I used to go to school with a fishing net, a little throw net in my bag. My mate would come with a couple of saucepans, and we would wag. We would go down to the beach and we would fish during the day, and then get back in time to catch the bus to go home. So, I mean, clearly I didn't. It might have sounded good at the time, but I wish I hadn't wasted so much of my time. But I guess I wouldn't have become the person that I am now, so I suppose. So I don't have regrets in that regard. But in a sense, it was interesting, because I didn't really like school too much. So for me to become a school principal and to go back and work in schools from the other end has been something that I've never forgotten, as a bit of a strange twist in my story. But along the way, I guess a couple of things I can tell you about commitment and to study, and commitment to yourself. And that is that along the way, as you spend more time and you make those commitments to your study, you have to dig deep in terms of the courage stuff. Believe in yourself. Unfortunately, for many of us, including myself, experience of the formal schooling process often leaves a bitter taste in their mouths, and certainly didn't mine, where I didn't really have a lot of confidence. I had a lot of anger to push me, and I had a lot of tenacity, but deep down I lacked confidence. And so instead of setting myself massive targets, I set myself short-term targets. But once I set those targets, I always made sure that I gave it my best shot, because I knew that if I didn't, and I walked away, I'd still keep walking away from problems. And that was something that I learnt along the way, is that it's easy to give up. It's actually easy to give up, and it's easy to walk away. Anyone can do that. It's pushing yourself through something that that you know, parts of you are saying, don't, you know, go away, walk away, walk away. It's easy, brother. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Your friends, you know, you're not spending time with your friends, and so they end up not ringing you anymore, or picking you up to take you out because you're not spending time with them. And that I found was a really hard thing to deal with. But I persevered, because I figured that if people couldn't respect me for putting in an effort, then what did it say about my friendship with them? So it was about recognising, I suppose, that in order for me to move forward, it meant I had to make those sacrifices and those commitments. So that's what I did, and so that's one of the things that I did. With study, at first I found it quite hard, but as time went on I found it easier, because I learnt the game. But in the time period that I was finding it hard, I made sure that if I wasn't going to give up, it meant that if I needed help, how was I going to get that? So it meant accessing the people and going after the people who had put their hand up, who'd said, you know, I can help. They might sometimes be a tutor or a lecturer, could be an older sibling, it could be anyone really. But I made sure I went after people to ask them, you know, if I needed questions clarified. If I were going to write a paper, well, there's no point in writing this paper unless I really know what they want me to write about. And so just simple things like knowing what the question was asking me, I would go and see the lecturer and say, well, you know, what's this really about? You know, what are the areas I need to be exploring in this paper? Over time, I didn't need to do that as much. It took me about 6 months actually to adjust to tertiary study. It was the strategies to inquire and the strategies to get the work done, but it was also the behaviours, the learning behaviours that I had to develop. That is, giving the time to the study. Study requires you to put the time commitment in, because if you try to do it on the take and just do it as something which is just on the side that you're just doing, and you still want to access all your mates and give them the bulk of your time, then it's not going to work. And so I made sure that I did make that commitment to my work. But it meant and I worked out how to do that. And one of them was to work Monday to Friday, long hours, hard hours, do the study. But I tell you what, most weekends I had to myself. And even though I didn't have much money, because I'd gone from being an electrician earning a lot of money to formal study and full-time study, I couldn't do electrical work apart from on holidays. I had to work out ways to be frugal, to save my money, and I had a push bike. I had a big motorbike, and I sold my motorbike and bought a push bike. And I cycled all around Darwin, and I got a job doing the Coke machines in Charles Darwin. It wasn't called Charles Darwin then, I think it was the Northern Territory Institute of Education or something like that. And so I got some extra money doing little jobs like that. But I made sure that I worked. It was the time management was a big one, and in those days when I first started, I didn't actually have a computer, and all my essays were handwritten. And you can imagine, for every essay, I had to handwrite 1, 2, sometimes 3 drafts, and I had something like about 8 units, 9 units in the first year that I studied. So it was pretty full on. Back towards the end of about 87, we got the old Apple IIes came in, and so for the first time in my life I actually started typing to a screen. And then shortly after that the Apple Macs come on. So it was around 87, 88 I suppose when I was able to start, you know, working and typing my essay, which was great. Some other strategies has been to actually read widely, not just the reference material that's been asked of you. I always made a point of reading beyond what was asked of me, so that I developed a broader understanding of the topic and the content that I was asked to do some work on. I made sure I never, if I was in a team situation with others to present information or a tutorial, I wouldn't let them down. I would be a good team member, and I was always there. Some interesting things happened during this experience, particularly in the 80s, that I got from even the Aboriginal community, because I was spending a lot of time in mainstream study and around non-Aboriginal people, and I remember one person saying to me, you know, "Oh, you think you're white?" And I reflected on that. I was quite annoyed about that. But it reminded me of how our own mob keep us back and regulate our own behaviours and keep us in the group. And so I copped a little bit of that, and which you know, if anything, it made me stronger. So you know, sometimes our own mob can hold us back. Certainly our friends do. When we see problems, rather than seeing them as mountains that are impassable, looking for the road around the mountain, but keep forward and keep moving forward, never giving up on yourself and on your dreams and your aspirations, because if you do, what is there left? More of the same circular things that we do, and we, you know, the things that make us happy today aren't necessarily the things that make us happy tomorrow, and so we're always forever looking for different ways to occupy our time and to find happiness. So for me, my time as a young person growing up and maturing was, I made my mind up around that and said, well, you know, I think my time's better served by actually making commitment to myself and to my community and giving back to the community and helping those kids that I saw struggling all those years ago. And black and white, and working with community, and there's nothing more positive and gratifying, I suppose, is to have the opportunity to see children previously struggling, overcoming those struggles. And I'm talking about kids whose families, you know, they've got problems, and those kids, sometimes they don't even have food, and they come to school, and you know, so to be a part of the journey with those kids and helping them to, you know, not only get fed but look after their mind and help them to develop positive ways of looking at the world. And to see the parents when they come in, and you know, when they shake your hand and or give you a hug or whatever, it's those connections in schools that have kept me focused and kept me committed. Teaching's not an easy profession. It is a hard profession, but it's a very honourable profession. And you know, along with nursing and any of those other organisations that help to give back and work with the community. But I can tell you the reason I stay committed to it is because it's about community, it's about families, it's about kids, it's about something that's bigger than me. And so, you know, I've learnt to channel my energies in such a way as to be constructive in this life, because we don't know how long we've got. Let's do something positive with the time that we have in this world. So that's the way I approach it. I remain committed to hopefully trying to leave the world slightly better than what I was born into. When I was born, I had no citizenship rights. I was born prior to 1967, so you know, and I grew up at a time when people obviously have been troubled throughout history, but certainly in my experience, I grew up in a very different Darwin to what it is today. There were lots of good things about that difference, and there were things that weren't good. What I've done is put that background history and put it together to give me strength to keep moving forward. I'm very aware that as a male Indigenous man involved in tertiary study and tertiary training, that I am a role model, and I try to make sure that I take that seriously, and I do the right thing, because I know that, you know, hopefully when people see me in the role that I occupy, that they start to think, well, yeah, if he can do it, I can do it. Because truly that's the thing that's been holding our mob back, is that that belief in ourselves to participate and be involved and to succeed in spaces where not necessarily too many Aboriginal people have succeeded, but that doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means too many of us have just been making the choice not to. So that's my story, you know, and I hope to think that if you see me walking down the street or whatever, you're able to say good day, and you know, I hope to be around for some time to come, and hopefully, you know, you'll take something from my talk to help you on your journey, and to find and to dig deep and to find that sense of strength to keep moving through your study and to do well. Don't ever give up. Never ever ever give up on yourself. You've got to back yourself, you've got to believe in yourself, you've got to have courage, you've got to have tenacity, and you know, inquire where you don't know. Don't invent new knowledge. Just work out ways that you can access the people around you, good and bad, black and white, doesn't matter, young and old. Look at the ways that you can access information and go forth. So that's it from me. So take care and enjoy your journey.